Today, I want to talk about effectual logics, how entrepreneurs actually think when they go about with their enterprises. So, to start off, I want to ask you a question. What do lemons, a quilt, and a dead bird have in common? They are ways of thinking used by entrepreneurs to start and grow their enterprises. These ways of thinking have been researched by Sarah Sarasvathy, a professor at the Darden School of Business, for her doctorate in 2001. Professor Sarasvathy interviewed entrepreneurs with a view to understanding how they think distinctively from the rest of us. What she found was that entrepreneurs do indeed think differently. Professor Sarasvathy distilled her findings into just 5 principles which she collectively refers to as effectual logics, or the principles of effectuation. I know it sounds like a very weird word to use, weird English, but you will see that it really does make a difference. Effectual logics are distinct from causal logics, where there is a predetermined goal and the process to achieve it is carefully planned in accordance with a set of given resources. That's causal logics. What underpins the logic of effectuation is the acceptance of uncertainty and the willingness to venture anyway. So Sarah Sarasvathy interviewed all these people who are successful, in inverted commas, entrepreneurs. And what she was finding whenever she was speaking to them was that they weren't thinking like the rest of us. They had a set of ways of thinking, a sort of style of thinking, which seemed messy and seemed peculiar. And it stems from this foundational acceptance of uncertainty. What we find with a lot of people who are engaged in formal logics, in the non-profit world, it's called the log frame. You start with a goal. You then get your objectives. You then have your inputs. You then have your outputs. From the outputs, you have your outcomes. And eventually that should meet your goal, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic causal logic that really helps people who are donating funds, who are project workers. It helps them to guide them through the process. But it's not how entrepreneurs think. Entrepreneurs accept utterly and work happily in a world that is uncertain. And this uncertainty leads to us understanding the first principle, the guiding principle of effectual logics, the guiding principle which Sarah Sarasvathy calls pilot in the plane. Okay, so pilot in the plane. What it's foundationally talking about is this idea of being able to deal with contingencies. Things are coming up. Think of yourself as being, if you're an entrepreneur, you're the pilot in a plane and you're flying from where you are to some other place, let's say New York. If you're the pilot in the plane, as you're flying, you're going to come across wind currents which will require you to change course. You're going to come across pressure differences, which is going to make you go up and down in a different way. You'll come across storm clouds that you have to go around so that you have a smooth flight. So you're not going to go in a straight line from where you are to New York. You're going to be meandering as though you will eventually get to New York, but you really are dealing with the unexpected contingencies that appear on the horizon, that come in front of you, and you're having to manage that process. This way of thinking for the uncertainties, for the things that you simply couldn't have thought were about to happen. Uncertainty is more than just managing risk. A famous researcher in entrepreneurship studies called Knight, Knight, 1930s. He really looked into the idea of uncertainty, and he saw uncertainty as something which is beyond risk, beyond the management and the amelioration of risk. It's really something uncertain. So often in insurance, you can't insure against risk, against uncertainty, but you can insure against risk. So uncertainty is beyond risk, and it's often deemed, acts of God, or sometimes they talk about force majeure and things like that in insurance terms. It's something that cannot be planned for, but you have to be in the plane, and you have to be the pilot managing that plane in order to deal with the uncertainty. I'll give you an example from my experience, from my background in business. I was once running a company that delivered sweets, chips, and biscuits, fast-moving consumable goods to little mom-and-pop stores, corner stores in townships in South Africa. We used to call them spaza shops. And what we were finding as we were delivering over many years is that people were dying from AIDS. The spaza shop owners were dying from AIDS, and their widows were having to bury the spaza shop owners. And this completely unplanned for situation really took over and overwhelmed a lot of our work. So I was spending days a week going to funerals, having to deal with people dying, having to deal with the debt they left behind. And also what we were finding then is that the widows were then renting out the spaza shop to foreign traders who started to proliferate across all the 27 townships we worked. And so we had to start changing the way we were working with these spaza shop, the new owners of these spaza shops who had their own systems. They didn't need our credit. They didn't need what we were offering them in the way we were offering them prior to the deaths, the AIDS deaths of so many of the spaza shop owners. So we had to change the way we were approaching the new foreign-owned shopkeepers. So that's an example of something that you can't plan for, but you have to deal with as a business. You just simply cannot ignore it. And the result is dealing with uncertainty is what makes an entrepreneur able to change course in mid-flight almost, yeah? So that is the pilot in the plane principle. It's that attitude to life that an entrepreneur embraces wholeheartedly. Okay, so thinking about pilot in the plane as a founding, overarching stance to doing and starting an enterprise, to engaging in business, I want to ask you, and I want you to reflect perhaps, is this something you do? Is this something that you naturally do? Or is it something that you perhaps is a kind of a new idea, or is a little bit scary? It creates a sense of anxiety in you to think that you don't know what's going to come down the road. You're going to start something. You're going to spend a lot of your effort. You're going to invest your time, your money into a project. Something can come up tomorrow, the next day, or in the next year or two that could literally just sink you. Destroy your business unless you change course. Are you prepared to embrace that very real possibility? If this brings anxiety into your heart, good. Okay, it's a good thing, because you need to be a little bit anxious about this, relating to being a pilot in a plane. It is frightening, and recognizing that, but doing it anyhow, is true courage. This is why I honor entrepreneurs. They truly have courage. They take the difficulties, they take the uncertainty, and they say, right, I'm going to do it anyway. So if I could ask you, think about that ability to do that. If you struggle with that, give yourself some little exercises so that you can start to flex your uncertainty muscles, as it were, your pilot in the plane muscles. Lean into the uncertainties of your life and just give yourself little challenges. When you're walking down the road, you normally turn left, but perhaps if you instead turned right and then meandered through another way, you could get to where you want to go just through another route. Small little things like that, and see what comes up as a result of you having changed course. This sort of have a conversation with someone that perhaps opens up possibilities and talks about things that perhaps you don't normally talk about, or perhaps is a little bit exposing, a little bit anxiety provoking. Not too much, but just enough so that you can see that there's another way of being and of co-creating a world that is different, a world that perhaps is more caring, perhaps is more fruitful, that produces human flourishing in a more easygoing way. So really, the pilot in the plane approach, I want you to think about and to reflect on, and I want you to really say yes to it. Yes, I embrace that. I can't change what's going to happen, but I can change how I'm going to address it. You can't change the direction of the wind, as the saying goes, but you can trim your sails. The next principle of effectual logics that I'd like to share with you is called the principle of affordable loss. This is one in which I really have failed many times over in doing, to my cost. Affordable loss, but also I've kind of learned to do it over time. It's the weakest muscle. It's the weakest entrepreneurial muscle that I have and that I've experienced in my life. But affordable loss is this idea that entrepreneurs will only invest what they have that they are prepared to lose. So they'll only invest in a project the resources that they are prepared to lose. Now, there are many times when I've invested in projects that, without thought of the cost, I invested my time, my effort, my ingenuity in a project. We were going to buy a block of flats with 50 flats in it. We sectional titled them. I was busy with all that work. Took me months. Took me a lot of work to do, and the result was that a very close family member of mine who was in the business with me ended up just dropping his backing for it, and I ended up feeling losing all that time, which I felt I really couldn't afford to lose, but also losing my relationship of trust with that family member. And it's something else I couldn't afford to lose. But also in terms of money, in terms of resources. If you've got 10,000 in a bank account, in a savings account, and you're not happy, but you're willing to lose it on a venture, then by all means, invest. That is the classic definition of affordable loss. If, however, you have 10,000 and that's all you have, or all you've got is your house, and you now mortgage your house to the hilt in order to run with a venture, that should be a red light. That is not how entrepreneurs think. They only invest what they can afford to lose. And often what they can afford to lose ends up to be relationships. So you think very carefully before you go into a venture and ask yourself, so what could I lose here? And if you're feeling that, I might lose a lot of money and I can't afford to lose a lot of money, or I might lose my friendship with someone very dear to me, or someone whom I trust, and you feel you can't really afford to do that, it's a red light. Don't do it. And entrepreneurs don't do it. So that I think is a really important principle, the principle of affordable loss. Just to give you another example of I started a business, and I had an ex-girlfriend who I'd known at university, and she still held some sort of candle for Doug, but I'd long gone, long past. I was quite willing to lose that friendship with her. I know it sounds really nasty, but I had thought about it, and I thought, if she's not up, if we fail, if she engages with this enterprise with me and it all goes pear-shaped, well, okay. And she doesn't want to talk to me again. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Not really much of a problem. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. She also happened to have an amount of money which she could lose, which she was able to lose. So she willingly invested in our business. 6 years down the line, guess what? It was a failure in the end, and she lost it. Yeah. By the way, she's still friends with me. We still communicate a little more distantly, perhaps, but that's okay. I can live with that. So that's the principle of affordable loss. It's not just about the money. It's also about the relationships. Are you willing to lose that relationship? So those are the 5 principles of effectuation or effectual logics that Sarah Sarasvathy developed. I think they're very useful. They help me to reflect on my own practice as an entrepreneur, my own entrepreneurial craft, and to ask myself, which entrepreneurial muscles am I really good at and what do I need to build? And I think you would do well as an entrepreneur to think about which of these principles do you naturally adhere to, that you naturally express and naturally way you think is the natural way of thinking, and which seem odd. And then to slowly build up those muscles that seem difficult for you so that you can start to build those entrepreneurial thinking muscles and really help you build your business. I run a coaching business. Happy to work with you to develop those muscles, to coach you through that. Because you're sort of your entrepreneurial gym muscle builder, as it were. And yes, I think looking at these 5 principles, they sort of work together. So it's not that you can just take one principle. It's that they all work together to help you develop your enterprise, to help you flourish. So if any of these resonate with you, great. If you want to work on some of those, again, you're welcome to come into contact with me. My details are in the comments section of this podcast. So if you're listening to this, you've probably got to the point where you've said yes. You've said yes to embracing uncertainty. You've said yes to being a pilot in the plane of your enterprise, your project. Now we come to the 4 basic sort of underpinning principles of effectual logics. The first one that I'd like to talk about is the bird in the hand. So remember at the beginning I talked about the English saying, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. What does that mean? Well, it means that what you have to hand is worth more than what might be out there in the bush that you still have to catch. So what you have is something far more valuable than what you don't have. And your wealth, your treasure is what you have. It's who you know. So I always think about my brother Mac. When he was very young, he used to spend hours running around the homestead chasing chickens. And he would chase chickens, go round and round and round and round the homestead. These chickens are squawking, and he'd chase the chickens and he'd never catch one. And the reason why he didn't catch one was because he hadn't focused. You see, if you want to catch a chicken, you've got to choose the chicken you want to catch. If you're choosing 2 or 3, you never catch one. You've got to choose the one that you're going to catch. I don't know why this makes me think of that, but I think I want to go even one step further. There was, when Mac was running around the cottage, the homestead, what he didn't, or perhaps didn't realize, was that our mother she was baking something. She was already roasting a chicken. So he didn't need to do all that running around to catch chicken at all. He was doing it obviously just to pass the time, and it seemed like fun for him. But that's the thinking of the bird in the hand. There's no need to go chasing after resources that you do not need when you already have the resources to hand. So this bird in the hand theory or principle is a way of thinking about starting a project and bringing a project to flourishing by asking yourself, who do I know that can help me with this? And how much have I got in terms of money, time, passion for this project? Really thinking through that in a reflective way is going to get you to the point of starting the project. You need to list it. You need to say, these are the people I know who can help me. These are the resources I have to hand. Be very deliberate about that. I'm a cartoonist is one of the things I do. And I like to spend, maybe an hour a day drawing. It's not easy. Often it's just 20 minutes. And painting a little bit, illustrating. It's something I do every day. I've got the resources to do it. They're to hand. I've got crayons and watercolor paint and brushes, and people have given me these things. And so I've got them to hand. I've got a whole box full of them. So it's not difficult. I've got paper available. It's not difficult. I've got the time available. So I can do this sort of thing, this little venture of mine of drawing and illustrating daily events, daily scenes that I might have seen or taken a photograph of on my mobile phone. It's something for which I have resources to hand. That's what you've got to be thinking about. It's got to be that easy, that attainable. Who do you know that is willing, that wants to help you in this venture, that would love to help you in this venture? How much have you got that's available sitting in a bank that isn't being used, that you're prepared to, that you've got? What passion do you have for this? Do you have the passion, the focus and the willingness to really engage in this venture? The last principle that I talked about, affordable loss, essentially that is a kind of risk assessment that you're looking at. It's a way of thinking about the risks that you can foresee. It requires foresight. What I want to talk to next, the next principle is called the lemonade principle. Lemonade principle, it comes from that saying, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And really, this is the very beating heart of entrepreneurial thinking, of effectual logics. Things will go wrong. There will be problems. There will be disasters, and there will be failures. It's not that's not going to happen. The key to an entrepreneur's way of thinking is what you do about the failure. And specifically, entrepreneurs regularly turn their failures into the features of their business or of their enterprise. I like to use the idea of Angostura bitters. I don't know if you know about Angostura bitters. It's basically a sort of herbal mixture that's put in pubs. It's used in cocktails. Angostura bitters is made in Trinidad in the West Indies, and there was a Dr. Angostura, really was a Dr. Angostura in 1860s, 1840s, or somewhere around there, who got this tonic that he'd made from local herbs and spices, and he put it together into a bitter. In those days, bitters were used quite regularly as medicine. So he had two sons, Dr. Angostura, and he said to his one son, "You're in the business with me. Come on, go and order 100,000. We're going to start this business. Order 100,000 labels." And there wasn't any printing works in Trinidad at the time, so they had to send off to the United States to do that. So they sent off to the United States, take about 3-6 months, and then there was a bottling plant in Spain, so they had to send off to Spain to get the bottles made, 100,000 bottles. So 3-6 months later, the ships come back with, 100,000 labels. The other ship comes back with 100,000 bottles, and disaster. Absolute disaster. The labels were too big for the bottles. So what did they do? They took their failure and they made it the feature of Angostura bitters. So to this very day, almost 200 years later, every bottle of Angostura bitters, the label is too big for the bottle. It's become the feature of their product. And it's a globally recognized product. It's a highly successful product. And part of that is by creating this, turning their failure into their feature as part of their marketing. So Angostura Bitters is an example of turning lemons, which life has given you, into lemonade. I've found that as well in my background. So one of the things that I struggle with is spelling, and is being able to. I struggle with it. You know, people say that I'm dyslexic. I'm going to own it, okay? But I'm very likely dyslexic. But I do struggle with spelling, and so often I have to rewrite and rework things. But this has really helped me to focus on how to do things and to ask people whom my wife, my daughter, my son, people in my family to check my work for me. And they are highly detailed, highly visual people, and they're able to tell me straight away where the mistakes are. And that's been a great assistance to me. It's kind of forced me to rely on my local natural network of supporters. And so, yes, the principle of lemonade is a very, very heartfelt and very, very central part of entrepreneurial thinking. What are your failures, and how can you turn those failures into features? The last principle that I want to talk about today is called patchwork quilt. This is a really interesting principle around which entrepreneurs think. So, and it's got to do with thinking about other people in your environment who are doing the same or similar things to you. Often when you are asked to do a business plan, they talk about competitor analysis. Entrepreneurs, by and large, successful entrepreneurs, don't really regard anybody as a competitor, as someone to compete against. They see competitors as potential partners. They see them as people to whom they can reach out and from whom they can get information and resources and share similar interests and passions. So this idea has been sort of called or labeled patchwork quilt because it feels like a patchwork quilt. There's different people with different interests forming this environment, which you might regard as competitors, but actually they're cooperators. And I feel very strongly that this is a foundational principle, which I agree with. And it's one that I've always just naturally wanted to get with. I struggle with this idea of constantly looking over your shoulder to see who you're competing with. My sense is that that's not how entrepreneurs generally think. They're not that interested. They're so impassioned by their own project that they don't see anybody else as being a competitor. They just see them as being potential partners. And that's what I'd like to encourage and ask you. Do you see competitors or do you see potential partners? If you naturally see potential partners, great. You're thinking like an entrepreneur. That patchwork quilt is you sewing it together. But if you are really worried about this idea of the competition and what they're going to do against you, I would encourage you to rethink, to reflect. Why? What is the fear that's driving you in that regard? Are you fearing that your idea, do you not believe that your idea is unique enough that there would be someone who compete against you? In my family history, I have sort of a wise sort of wisdom tale or cautionary tale. I have a 3 times great-grandfather whose name was William Carter Stafford Percy. And he lived in Liverpool most of his life. And in the 1830s, he started making brick-making machines. And he patented this brick making machine, and he called it Percy's patent. The machine was called, I think, the Champion brick making machine. Well, one of his competitors in London didn't like this competition and took him to court. The thing that's really messed William Carter Stafford Percy's life up, and he actually ended up in debtor's prison, was he really didn't take seriously this competition. He was so sure that his brickmaking machine, the Champion, was so unique that no one could compete against him. But the competitor in London had a lot of people in the judiciary in his pocket. I'm sure he was a mason of some sort. And literally, they took him to court and sued him and pursued him. And he ended up in debtor's prison for 12 weeks. His son John Percy had to bail him out. But he continued with carrying on with making many, many different patents through his life, and he carried on being ingenious and an innovator. So that's a little bit of a cautionary tale. But most entrepreneurs, they do not think about the competition. They're so enraptured by their own project.